Hey everyone, Tom Seymour here from VHS Masker. I'm here with the one and only Tim Kulig, Free Music, my best friend, but I just call him Tim Kulig. But
I have many names.
or Timmy K,
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite. Yeah. So thanks for being here.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
You're approaching a pretty huge milestone in regard to how many songs you've published.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you hit the big 700. Is that correct?
It is correct. They're not officially released on all platforms yet via DistroKid, but by the 20th of this month, they will be. There's two more albums in the queue. So there's, let's see, I've got the jazz albums out, the Christmas albums out. There's another meditation album, and then there's a harp album, which I'd been punting for like 9 months, probably like a year, dude. I haven't, some of those tunes I was just like letting sit there and marinate, which is like a weird thing to say about music.
Hmm.
I'll do that. I'll literally like be like, oh, that song's got to marinate a little longer because I don't know how to finish it or, you know.
Yeah, right. You
So,
just gotta leave it alone for a little bit and then come back to it with a clear head, and then it's very easy. It's like tweak this, kick it
yeah,
out. Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
unlike nonlinear editing, to be honest.
Oh yeah, very
There's
much so.
times I know on projects that you and I have worked on that you've gotten to a point where you don't quite have a picture lock yet, but you've got, 40, 50, 60 minutes. And it's that last 10% that's always 90% of the work, right?
Yeah.
Like just kind of wrapping the whole thing together and making it a cohesive thought and story and journey. It's strange, man. It's the same thing with music. I think it's the same thing with anything creative, honestly. It's that
Yeah.
last port where you're like,
I think
am
the
I?
only
Yeah.
difference I would say in regard to feature length films versus music is that the sheer, like, a movie is kind of like a song, like, maybe like a symphony, more like a symphony, right?
Mm,
And you have to hold the whole thing in your head. So really, when you're going through edits, you have to know that um, if you remove 2 minutes from the beginning, that could make the whole thing watchable. If something is 2 minutes too long in the beginning,
mm.
people literally might say the whole movie sucks. Like, there's a balance like that.
It's a
You're
weird thing, isn't it?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's definitely the same, but it's I think there's a difference in the length of things. And that's the closest like thing I could think of is to like either a symphony or like when you're scoring a whole film,
Hmm.
then that would be similar, I think.
It's strange. You know, I'll go back and listen to stuff that I did 2, 3 years ago. And I'm saying this like it's nostalgic for 2 or 3 years ago, but when you do 700 tunes published in that time frame, it feels like nostalgia. It feels like forever ago. I went back to Glitches, like one of my Glitch albums I did just last year,
Mhm.
and that feels like 10 years ago because of everything in between that and what I did then. But it's funny, my tolerance for certain tunes and how I develop them and how they load up, so to speak, changes over time. So at the time, I felt like it had the intro I wanted. It goes on the path and takes the journey it wants, and it ends the way I want it. Then I go back and listen to it. I'm like, you know, I could have just gotten right into it,
Yeah.
and which makes me think, Tom, that sometimes some old stuff may have more legs than I realized. Like I could come back to it and do a remix of it. Artists do that all the time, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons why is that you grow musically over time. Hopefully, if you're, trying new stuff or trying new genres and everything else, and then you come back to it and you're like, "Oh, I could have done A, B, and C to this, and I would have liked it even better." So, I'll probably eventually start doing that when I feel like I need to like just just explore something or I'm not feeling that creative spark and I just need to play.
Yeah, something you said resonated with me, like this concept of get right into it.
Hmm.
And I've noticed that too with some of my old features where because I've done a few recuts. Exorcism of Fleet Marriage has it's a recut with all your score in it, which I think is so much better. But on multiple films, including London Betty, I went back and the biggest adjustments I did to the cut were the beginning, getting right
Yeah.
into it. And I don't sometimes I don't think you have that confidence until much later. You've sat with it, it's digested, and you're just like, yeah, let me pull this out. Let's just start. Let's just get into it. And
Hmm.
like I'd say two or three of my films, I've gone in and looked at it and like, yeah, I really should have jumped right into it. So two of the films, it's literally two or three less minutes of introduction.
Right, right.
Um, the only thing I didn't do was Everything Moves Alone. That's all the same. And I think that has to do with the fact that when we were shooting on 16, there was no extra footage.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you had a man, that was an amazing that story is amazing because what you had to do, I mean, just the like just going through Video Dreams right now and the edits and watching those and just realizing like you had to pretend you were from Boston. Oh yeah, we're shooting a movie locally, and you're like, let's just hang on to this for 10 days and hopefully nothing happens to the equipment and they don't figure out that we're not supposed to be we left the state with it. You
yeah.
know,
Well,
like
just for the audience, so
yeah.
Video Dreams is a collaboration between Tim Kulig and I. He's producing he's in it, and then he's doing the score as well. It's something I'm directing. It's kind of the last 30 years of our filmmaking. And so I just wanted to set the stage for the Video
Absolutely.
Dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah. But uh yeah, it was funny. We had to we even had to like they needed an ID, like a Boston college ID, and we kind of like get
Who'd
put
you know?
together. We
Who did you know at the time up there?
we didn't know anyone, and
Oh,
the internet was primitive, so you couldn't look up. So I think we like cobbled together this thing and did like multiple photocopies and just emailed them this thing that was like
all right. So that's the most amazing statement said so far. The internet was primitive.
yeah,
Uh, the Gen Z and or alphas that may be listening to this, like, will never know, you know, cassette tapes, pre-internet, like dial-up, no clue.
yeah.
But like the challenges, the trials and tribulations, bulletin board systems where you had to leave a message, wait a day, and come back and chat with some woman or girl you're interested in or whatever, and hope the communication keeps going, like that kind of thing.
But yeah, the idea of like Googling what's a Boston college or any university within Boston or Massachusetts, like what the ID would look like, the odds are that just was not online, period.
No, no.
So
I mean, there wasn't enough content back then,
yeah, yeah.
if
Well,
any.
speaking of which, so let's go back to early days of you. What was your first keyboard?
Oh, first keyboard. My God. Time period, keyboard itself, Casio CZ101. So that was an FM synthesis based programmable keyboard. So you could take in like sine waves, um, square, sawtooth, all that stuff, and you change the attacks. There's envelopes and different things that you could program to simulate different sounds. My one of my favorite things to learn how to do initially on the thing was to make a helicopter sound, right? But ultimately, you can make something sound like strings or piano or like some kind of synthy pad thing, bass guitars, that kind of thing. And I actually had a teacher. His name was Bruce McPherson. He played in this band called Thunder Road from New Britain, Connecticut. And my father went to a couple gigs that he played at. And at the time, I wanted to learn the trumpet, right? And my dad's like, nah, you got asthma. You're going to learn the keyboard. Thank God for my father, like 'cause I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if I'd taken on the trumpet. It's funny how like your life has these forks in the road and you take one versus the other, and like your whole life envelops a different way, you
Yeah,
know.
seriously, yeah.
But um, in addition to taking traditional music theory, I learned from this guy, from Bruce, how to program these things and actually make the sounds I wanted to make. And more importantly, he taught me how to play the patches in a way that emulated and simulated the actual instrument. So what do I mean by that, Tom? Like you wouldn't play like a four-finger chord when you're playing a trumpet track, right? Because a trumpet inherently only has one note played at a time, right? Or like a saxophone, like a little like bending, pitch bending and vibrato and stuff, like all those little things. So I don't think I would have had that nuance understanding if I hadn't had some training with him, which was great. But
Yeah,
but
that's
yeah,
that's really cool.
CZ 101, I think it had this is another thing that's not a modern thing because computers, but it had only God, I think it was 4 or 8 note polyphony, which means the keyboard itself could only play 4 to 8 notes at a time before it started truncating those notes on playback. And that was frustrating
Yeah,
because you
sure,
had
yeah.
very limited MIDI information, recording into a computer. And you had to write things in such a manner as to maximize your notes. Now that includes drums. So if the keyboard itself had some drum tracks or something, every hit is a note on. So
Yeah.
so like, dude, you like it's a different world now. It's
I
so much better.
I remember that phenomenon too with certain keyboards because you could, if you mashed all the keys, you would hear a limitation come through the speakers. It would
Yeah.
like there'd be like a bloom bloom, like it would
Yeah.
jump here and there
Right, right,
because you were triggering too many notes. So that
right.
was an interesting phenomenon. And so uh but then the sort of evolution of you as a musician, I think you were in you had a band in high school, you were in band, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you eventually started recording. You had did some rock stuff, some sort of Nine Inch Nails. What genre is that? That's like
Industrial, right?
industrial. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That was shortly after high school. I did that. I think I did that in that ADAT deck and music
Yeah.
studio that your brother had for a few
Yeah.
years there
Yeah, everyone
down in
used that
Slankton.
ADA, including
Yeah.
me. He would
Yeah.
get so pissed when I would use it. He'd be like, dude, this is because it was a business, you know.
Right, right.
And I was like fucking around with it. But
What's nuts though, dude, is that I don't think a lot of people know this, but after the first couple of years I was out of high school, like I had like a good 5 year period where I didn't touch the instrument at all. I didn't record anything, I didn't write nothing. I just had to kind of focus on, career and making money and surviving, working like 3 jobs, blah blah, and I walked away from music. It wasn't until I was like 25, somewhere between 25 and 27 that I set up a new system, and I think I got my first iMac set up at that time with a Pro Tools
I
setup.
remember that, man. You were one of the you were you sort of got thrust into adulthood in regard to like earning your own living while you were still in high school, you know. And I remember it just certain people impress you in certain ways, and I always I'm like this guy had his shit together way ahead of time, you know,
Oh, you're
like
giving me way too much breadth there.
well, I guess you just had to. It was just survival. You had to work to keep a roof over your head and all that. But no, and the 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 idea that you'd have to put it down for 5 or 6 years,
Yeah.
that's just you know what, that's just life. I mean, I hate to, you know, that's just kind of a middle class, you know, life. Like so many of us don't get to do this stuff full time, you know. It's a rarity.
Meanwhile, meanwhile, Tom from like 14 to now has never stopped. Like, doesn't matter what career he's had, you
Well,
know.
it always no matter how horrendous my job was, and there's been some doozies, it was the thing. I've always felt that whatever your art is your passion. If you throw yourself into it enough, if you make it great enough and make it take up enough of your life, it shrinks how horrendous your fucking job is.
Right.
So that's kind of been my motto. I've tried, it's like I've tried to get better jobs over the years. Actually, really like in this past year, I really like what I do. But that's taken a long time to get to that point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
But
there's always that transition, right? Like when you change positions, you go to a new place, you've got to find the culture, you've got to find your groove with it, you got to find the work-life balance if it's even possible. I mean, people go their whole lives and don't get a work-life balance until they retire, which really sucks because, you know, you spend, half, if not longer, of your waking life 5 out of 7 days a week in this place. It should be somewhat enjoyable, right?
you have to try. You have to
Yeah.
try, and I really didn't know it at the time, but uh and I know that some people are down on formal education. But I like for me, it actually saved me.
Yeah.
I didn't know getting my because I went to community college. I was a C high school student, put education down for years and years, but getting my BA, my MFA, that was the thing that helped me climb out of the fucking
Yeah.
dungeon that was in. It's not true. It's not true or needed for everyone, but just for me that it was.
Yeah. Well, I think that lifelong education, Tom, is vitally important. It doesn't have to be from, an accredited institution. It could be some class you take online, some 6 week thing you do at a community college, I don't know,
Read some
some
books. Yeah.
retreat,
Yeah.
books, retreats, a YouTube channel that you really start vibing on,
Yeah.
and whatever it takes. And it just, as long as it's something that, what is it? There's something I've been reading recently or seeing recently from multiple places online, whether it's like a motivational TikTok or something on LinkedIn or whatever, but it's this listening that you need to do. People that feel like they don't have a passion or don't have a direction in life. They feel like they're just punching a clock. The idea is that you've got to listen to the universe and what gets you excited. Like what in your life makes you excited to get up early or excited to like just wake up in the morning. Like think about those things. And even if it's you're like, I don't know if I can make any money, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you can make money at it or not. If it's something that excites you, do it because there's something about the energy of that, and that'll just draw other things to you if you're pulsating into the realm of the things that excite you, because that's
Yeah.
that's where true creativity comes from.
Yeah. And I think we're both people that have been able to have enough of a creative engine to make things happen. And that's a gift in a sense. So
That's discipline, Tom. You
yeah.
know, and I mean, coming back to what I said about you from 15 till now, it's literally discipline that's gotten to you to where you are in in filmmaking. Period. It you know, either one of
Because
us.
it's not money.
No, no, I mean, dude, it
Yeah.
literally consistency day in, day out. Not every day. I mean, look, I sit down, I do that Monday, Friday thing now. That's my new thing this year. Monday, Friday, 5 ideas on Monday, 5 ideas on Friday. It's not always five. Sometimes it's one or two, sometimes it's 10. But like just sitting down and doing the thing and coming up with ideas, that consistency has helped me get to that 700 point. In fact, I might even get closer to 750. I don't know. Like, I'm not going to push myself for that, but I do have 40 some odd projects in the works right now, plus
Yeah.
some other ideas. So,
So you you had you had been scoring films with me for about it's over 20 years, I think.
yeah.
And so you
The few
had,
early ones where you're let's talk about
yeah, sure.
your your many hats with the first like 3 or 4 movies. Like you literally did the music, edit, directing, producing, pre-production, post-production, um,
Yeah,
craft
I
services. Freaking Tom wore every hat,
yeah,
and
and but I obviously worked with other people. I worked with you, worked with Mike Aransky, Phil Garrett, Bruce would chip in, my dad would cater here and there.
yeah,
So it
building that
definitely
well,
building the well, we built
building
this
the
well
my
together.
God, for a year. I didn't realize it was
Yeah,
that long.
it was a long time, yeah. It was something to do. Um, yeah, because pre-production is something that you can do in your spare time. And if
Right.
it's just you and just a few other people, you're just doing it. It doesn't cost anything really. I mean, it did. I think Bruce chipped in for that movie, which
Mm.
Land of College Profits, which is
Yeah.
streaming. So that's we were able to build the well and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, pre-production was a bear, but yeah, a lot of it came down like ultimately I would probably classify myself as more of an AV nerd because we would in high school uh we would buy like old used half broken camcorders from pawn shops and stuff like that, and old VCRs so we could edit between the VCRs, and it evolved from there. Moving into actual 16 millimeter film, I was almost embarrassed into doing it because people would talk so much shit. Like, gotta remember, this is like early 90s.
Yeah.
People did not hold back,
No.
So
That looks
they,
like garbage.
it
Bah!
looks like
You know.
shit. Yeah, you're an asshole. Looks like
Thanks.
shit.
Thanks.
Yeah, yeah,
What have you made?
yeah. But
You know what I mean? It's
so
like,
at the time, I remember being in Fun Stuff Video, and I was like, "Oh, I think I could get my hands on a Super VHS camcorder," which I was not to rent. And I remember this guy going, "Super VHS sucks," and he's like, "Film is where it's at," blah blah blah, and just shitting all over, my
little did they
plans.
know that, like, dude,
Him being such an asshole.
this
Yeah.
this is 4K.
Yeah. Yeah, it ultimately all went you know, to video, if you will,
Yeah.
ironically. But
Yeah.
most of it, 90% of it. But uh that's how that came to be, and teaching myself I learned some still photography in community college, but they didn't have any film equipment. So it's like my dad and I had to figure out how to meter for film, and we read books on it, stuff like that. So it's
Yeah.
like it
Yeah,
was
but
it,
the books were about like making a Hollywood film. None of them focused on the independent that has like this piecing together equipment and technology, right?
it was never that low. There was John Russo's book on movie making, but even that was hundreds of thousands of dollars. That didn't apply to us. It was
Right.
only Rebel Without a Crew by Robert Rodriguez was probably the only one that dealt with like what you'd call no budget.
Yeah.
So he would say, "Hey, look, get some." That I will say that credit to Robert Rodriguez. That's a dude who he puts all his cards on the table. He doesn't fucking pretend that he had more than money than he had or any of that stuff.
Right.
So
Right.
he would say, like, get some can lights from Home Depot, stick large wattage bulbs in them, and he had a bunch of techniques that you could throw together a light kit for a couple $100. But
Yeah.
that was back before any LED. All the stuff was like none of that shit was around. Like the lightweight jibs, like we made our jib out of electrical conduit, like our lights were like, yeah, can lights from Home Depot or work lights that we stuck a gel over or diffusion.
Right.
So
Right.
it's like there wasn't a low budget indie film uh backed equipment movement. That didn't happen till really 2000s. You started to have like prosumer
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Where you get like an HD level uh final product
Yeah,
that
yeah, or at
that
least 24 frames so people will
Yeah.
laugh at you, you know. But
Although, ironically to that, you go back and look at like some of the comedy stuff like Steve Brule and all that, where they do like it almost looks like found footage
yeah,
of
yeah.
VHS stuff, and now that's funny and nostalgic and hilarious to
And
watch.
desirable. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's weird. All this, and I've heard this with filmmakers too. All the stuff you ran from becomes like cool again, you know.
yeah.
But
It's like
s-
synthwave and 80s style music. Like I'm writing albums about that stuff, and people are eating it up because they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember that. Remember like Beverly Hills Cop and all these buddy cop movies and stuff from the 80s. That music was fun." And you're like, I have thousands of patches
yeah.
that can make that stuff.
Well, so you had a collection of tunes from scoring various things, but am I correct in saying it wasn't until you and I started working on the McLeod doc that you really started to gravitate towards like sort of why am I not doing this kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. It just made sense. The more we explored Kevin's history and how he just basically put it out there for people to use under Creative Commons, and before Creative Commons was even a thing, it was just royalty free for him. And his argument was the royalty free music that was out there just sucked, and he was like, I could
Yeah.
do that better, and why don't people just use my stuff? Fast forward 25 years later, he's the OG. That's People are still to this day using his stuff, and tremendously. I mean, to the point of like I have this argument like trillions. His music has been heard trillions and trillions of times. It's in memes, it's in freaking movies.
Yeah, I mean
It's crazy.
he's a phenomenon. So I assume everyone listening knows who Kevin MacLeod is. Certainly the YouTubers know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, Kevin MacLeod's been giving recording royalty free music for anyone to use in their uh, uh, like projects for over 20 years now, 20,
I
30
would
years.
say, yeah, late 90s. Late 90s from the last conversation I had with him. It was like the late 90s
So
that when he was first starting to do it.
when you jumped into it, you had maybe like 100 tunes.
About 100 to 150. Some of them needed to get cleaned up a little bit, but that was all from like some of the earlier films I did with you, also some internet stuff or some various projects over the years, and then just some archival stuff I had on my hard drive.
So,
But
but from McLeod forward, so that was what, 3 years ago? No.
2021 is when I got serious about it.
So in three
And
years,
late 2020, like August.
okay. So really just in a couple years, you've cranked out uh well, 500 or 600, but now you're up to a 700 count.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, most people are not gonna do that in their entire lives. I would imagine that you're in the top probably 0.1%, maybe 0.01% of recording artists that have put out 700 songs. You ever look into that? Like where you sit?
I haven't because I'm gonna say that I don't want to get I don't think I wanted to get wrapped up in the minutia of that and just focus on doing the thing as opposed to like the whole comparison game, right? Because like what we talk about often is like run your own race, right?
Yeah,
So I have a goal, an intermediate goal of hitting 1,000, and a long-term goal of doing between 2 and 3,000 tunes and beyond, right?
yeah,
But that 1,000 milestone, it's very like I can see the forest, the end of the clearing, and
yeah.
it's very possible that clearing is the end of next year, which blows my mind considering this journey is like barely started. Like some of that stuff is literally just baking into the internet now and being used. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that you get beyond 1,000, it's possible that there's only people in the world that could be a two-digit number of people who've gotten beyond 1,000, you know.
I think you'd be surprised
Really?
because I did do some research on this maybe a year ago, and there was some woman that had like a Guinness Book record of like 40 or 50,000
Oh shit.
tracks in her lifetime. And I
Wow.
forget her name, and I apologize. Probably should have brought that information to this podcast, but that to me sounded like, dear God, how did you, how, how? And this is like predating all the current tech. You know what I mean? I think it came up and through
Yeah, like
that.
the number that's like a song every that's like two
It's
songs a day or something for your
just
entire life.
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's something crazy.
It's absurd.
Um, yeah,
And what constitutes a song, right? So that's another thing too. Sometimes people take issue with the fact that modern music, if you go on Spotify or any of the streaming channels and you have like a subgenre that's kind of unique, like a subgenre of electronica that's very hyper specific, sometimes those tracks are a minute, minute 20, like not very long. They don't evolve. Like Dreamcore is a classic example of that. Sometimes Dreamcore just has this like feeling, doesn't go anywhere. It just kind of grooves for a little bit and then it's gone and then the next track comes up. And I think that's a sign of like short form content, just attention span, the modern 21st century attention span,
yeah.
that kind of thing.
I
But
would for some reason the being over a minute sticks in my head as like just sort of being enough to qualify as a song, you know.
yeah,
I'm sure there are criteria lower than that, but to me, it's like if you're going to put out an album, it's like, unless it's some specialized outro,
yeah.
then
Why
you know,
function, right? Like if
yeah.
you're that's something I've been touting for a year and a half. I've got to do intros album. I got to do, you know, podcasting bed albums with different subgenre specialized. You know, let's do one for comedy. Let's do one for, self-reflection. Let's do one for meditation, that kind of thing, and have beds and intro outros and stuff. And I mean, some of those in those cases, 30, 45 seconds would be a track that serves a purpose, a function, and that
Well,
would
yeah,
be it.
I
You
like
know?
that that it seems like there must be such a freedom in that. Whereas like when you're scoring a film, there's a there's a limitation to it, and there it can be highly enjoyable because you're finding interesting. You're improving the visuals. You're creating emotions. You're doing all this
Right.
interesting stuff. But sometimes you can go through rounds and rounds of changes, and it wears on you. Whereas when it's the reversal, when you're saying, please pick from any of these 700 tunes, and individuals can pick exactly what works for them, I'd imagine it's a much more enjoyable process and more satisfying
Oh, there's
for
a
them.
freedom to it for sure, Tom. Like it allows you to focus on the genre that you want to. Even if like recently I've tapped a few of the folks that use my music pretty regularly and literally asked them like, "Hey, you know, would you mind taking a look at a batch of stuff that typically you use and give me some feedback on what would work for you and what wouldn't and why?" Because it's my fervent desire to focus on when I jump into those genres to make things that you're going to use. I want to be functional for you in what I do. And first and foremost, I can tell you the response has been phenomenal because, I mean, somebody's approaching you and saying, I don't want anything other than the attribution. But since you use it, it motivates me to continue projects and to get excited about making some music. So I want to share this with you. And I want to make sure the direction is something that you're going to use. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's some kind of hybrid in between contract work where you get these repeated edits because of certain music cues they want, and then they change you think you had a picture lock, but you don't, and now the cues get shifted and you gotta adjust the tune, and it's like, oh, it has a different sound. That's just a big mess. That can be just a huge mess, you know?
You know what I wanted to on that subject I wanted to bring up is so American Expendables feature-length documentary. It's going to be hitting that Tim Kulig provided the music for, and I think is a large reason why it's done so well. The music is just perfect for it.
Thanks, dude.
There's a few things with that film I just wanted to get out of the way. It's going to be streaming on Tubi
Mm.
on November 12th, which is a big deal for Tim and I to have that hit. And
Oh
then
God, that's
recently,
Tuesday, right? That's
yeah,
Tuesday.
it's coming right up. Yeah, yeah. So
That's
that'll be
awesome.
on Tubi, which is like a kind of a big deal for that particular project because it was that one was an interesting story of how that came to be. It also got into San Francisco Indie Fest, another hole in the head, which San Francisco Indie Fest runs several of these film festivals, but they are one of the largest independent film festivals that actually take independent films. It's not like Sundance where it's all studio projects,
Right.
and you have to have like
Yeah, this is a micro budget movie. Yeah, it's $6 million. That's not
yeah,
micro. Yeah, it's
yeah.
not micro budget.
And it's like the agent got them in, and it's like it's not even for sale. Like it's already, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's just a big
yeah,
advertising venue at this point. You
yeah,
know.
yeah. But San Francisco Indie Fest is like it's I think it's one of the largest that is still actually taking independent stuff, which
Yeah.
I tend to think of as more no budget.
And
But
this isn't the first time we've been tapped over there, right?
no, it's the second time getting in, which is
Yeah.
like a really important thing. But hey,
Yeah.
I think we're running out of time, Mr. Tim Kulig.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, man, congrats on the big 700. I think it's a huge deal, man.
Thanks, brother.